Om Shanti. Welcome to Interview with Raj Yogi. And our topic tonight is continuing with the power of contentment. So, first, we'll start with a reflection. As I sit here quietly, I check in on the diet of my own mind. What thoughts are being fed to my mind? And what are the quality of those thoughts? Very often during the day, I think the same thoughts I always have thought, habituated thoughts, thinking loops. But are those thoughts providing nourishment, strength, fulfillment to my mind? Or is my mind simply addicted to those thoughts? Feeding my mind, nourishing, fulfilling thoughts, thoughts that give the mind peace, lightness, strength, clarity, and creativity. Thoughts that create well-being in my mind. These are pure thoughts. Pure thoughts are the healthiest diet for my mind. Thoughts based on the truth. Thoughts about being a soul, an eternal being, my relationship with the Supreme Soul, the intrinsic goodness of my nature as a soul. These are pure thoughts that truly fill my mind. Not empty calories or waste, but very rich thoughts that bring contentment to my mind. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. So, welcome to all who've joined or will be joining if they are watching this recorded session in the future. And so, as Judy mentioned, we are continuing with our topic of the power of contentment. And the intention of the first session was really to explore what it is, really touched upon. It's so many of the words in spirituality can sometimes sort of be glazed over because of our own personal experiences. And so the tonight's session is really about the how. And during the reflection, I was actually thinking about there are many who feel extremely demotivated. And so, in terms of what are your thoughts, in terms of is there maybe sort of a sequence of events that allows one to perhaps have an interest of really wanting to take care of what is going on inside. Um, Maybe there's a couple other different contributors to that.
I think there's a couple of things that ideally could happen, and reflecting on the life of Brahma um, in terms of the question. And yes, it's very difficult when one is demotivated or low on power to do something powerful. That's a challenge, but not impossible. We see it all the time when the head's in the right space. And one thing we saw with Brahma Baba was, we've talked about before, this quality of disinterest, and it connects to the idea of the diet of the mind in terms of metaphorically. So one can be eating something that they know isn't healthy for them, but they are addicted to it. They don't have that strength to switch to something more powerful. There's a couple of forces that can help them to switch. One is something might be happening to the soul. They might be exposed to something that's actually, if you will, changing their taste buds. So their sensitivities, so they go to eat something that before was very satisfying, but because of whatever they're being exposed to that's changing their tastes, they eat it and suddenly they just sort of spit it out because it's just not tasty anymore. And they were addicted to it, but suddenly it's just. So that's one scenario. And the other, of course, we've talked about is crises. So a very critical thing can happen such that it changes. They're very motivated suddenly to change. They knew that they should before, but when the crisis happens, and as I'm describing these two scenarios, I am thinking of two actual situations where each of these scenarios played out. And the first one was a soul who it had to do with switching over to a vegetarian, or we call it sattvic diet. And they knew that that was good, healthy for them. But they also knew that it wouldn't be sustainable if they just sort of dove into the deep end. And so what they did was expose themselves to spiritual knowledge over a period of time. It actually changed their tastes on multiple levels, even literally. And they literally one day went to eat something that was not sattvic or vegetarian, and they spit it out because it just was a complete distaste. So that was very interesting. So they had exposed themselves to something that was changing their sensitivities. And in the other scenario, it was of someone who suffered a heart event, a cardiac event, and after they were very strongly motivated to change their diet, even though they had been a very staunch supporter of their previous diet. Overnight, they changed because of that crisis. So, in the right circumstances, but even souls again, their timing, their circumstances have to be taken into account. But disinterest and crises are strong motivators.
Yeah, timing just came up as the last thing I was thinking about when you were
Mm-hmm.
sharing. And in terms of, because it does feel like it's also connected to staying content as well.
Mm.
Um, I know a couple of months back we had the session. It was a three-part series about the power of recognition. Um, what ignites that, what sustains that, and the impact of it. But contentment, is quite interesting, and it's a part of the how, because we become content about very ordinary things, perhaps maybe not so healthy things, may not even seem like it. So that seems to have become a habit. So for many, and you hear like this, I really need to change, or this is a very meaningful experience or realization. I really should do something for myself. And so, what can be helpful is that connected to perhaps that previous session about maintaining that contentment.
Hmm. Um, Raj Yoga is a beautiful study in many ways, but one thing I always appreciate is that it's very methodical. So often we can be very hit and miss. And so I might hit upon an experience of true contentment, but I'm not quite sure how I got there. So I can't recreate it at a later date. And that will be very difficult to sustain since I don't know what I'm doing. So I always appreciate that it's very methodical, that it really gives you the method so things don't have to be hit and miss. Now, there is a catch to this because although it's giving the method, not to insult anyone, we're not that great at following directions. So it starts to become hit and miss again. But theoretically, if I was good at following directions, then it would be very clear. And the directions are set up on a formula or a model that we call aim and objective. So I want to experience this stable state of contentment. That's my objective. And Raj Yoga will tell you very clearly, well, you need to aim or focus on this to have that stable experience of contentment. If I focus directly on, I want a stable stage of contentment, I won't get it. I'm back to hit and miss. So it's quite a funny study that way. But instead, it says focus over here on experiencing yourself to be a soul and having meaningful experiences in that state of the Supreme Soul. And you will get constant containment. And it breaks that down, how to do that. And so we land up sort of refining our capacity to do this thing over here. And we start to notice our contentment stabilizes.
Is it perhaps then maybe our idea of what creates contentment, perhaps maybe misaligned that we now call it an indirect
Mm-hmm.
um, focus? That I want contentment, I have the
Mm-hmm.
aim here, or is it
Mm-hmm.
perhaps maybe this is always the source of
Right.
contentment and I had it all wrong?
Mm-hmm. With contentment, what we're doing is we're describing a certain state because I think it was last week we said contentment actually is one of the presentations of purity. That when a soul is pure, they have contentment, which means freedom from desires. So we're saying to aim over here, it's indirect, what we're actually aiming on. What happens when I consider myself to be a spiritual being and have this very meaningful connection with the Supreme Soul is I am going to become pure. And that will naturally, one of the signs of purity is contentment. So it is direct because contentment is one of the signs of purity.
I feel like I'm sort of jumping back to last week, but I
Mm.
think that I recall there was a question I wanted to ask, and we're running out of time. But it is a part of just it. I feel it's actually part of sustaining it too. But I think perhaps maybe we don't realize how powerful contentment is, the impact of it. Like I think we just take it for granted. That's what has your experience been like around souls who are content?
Hmm. Yeah, it's. I personally feel that it is the need of the time. It is the stage that's needed, especially at these times and as we go along. If souls look honestly at what's going on in their minds, there's so much neediness. There's so many desires. The oldest scripture, which is really a manual for a happy life, it's called the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, and it talks about contentment. It talks about it, the way it refers to it is you must conquer all desires, which is contentment. And this is the main focus of that. If you want a happy life, a peaceful life, so to look very honestly at the mind, And it can get very royal and subtle, this neediness, this desire, this wanting things a certain way. And then I start to make decisions based on that. I start to have attitudes and perceptions based on that. I think they're right. Um, and I kind of completely get a distorted sense of how to move through life. So it completely distorts all of my life. Like it has a huge ripple effect in how I function and interact. So, but when a soul is content, I've been on different team projects, and when you have a soul who is content on the team, it's not that they're, apathetic or they don't do anything. They actually do a lot. We were just on a team, and I'm thinking of one soul who, a huge part of contentment at its most subtle level, because remember, it's purity. And purity is the state where the soul is in its highest stage of self worth. So, at the heart of this is I have fulfillment at the most important level, which is my self worth, my self value. If a soul has that, they really don't need anything else. All of our activity during the day is motivated from wanting to feel more valuable. So if I have that, I don't seek name, fame, recognition. I have it. I don't need to get it from any source. I have contentment at the most important level. So there is a soul on the team who really is, I think, truly in that stage. And they are, first off, things go so easily, like so easily. But what I enjoyed, the way I described them was, I don't know if people know this story, but, and I don't remember all the details, so I'm going to just give the best I can. But something about um, Holland somewhere, a little village, was threatened to be flooded, and they built a dam. But they were beautiful, great dam, but there was just a little hole that they had not, they'd missed. And that little hole was going to, does this story sound familiar? Was going to compromise the whole
Yes, it
situation.
sounds
So a
familiar.
little boy comes along and sticks, maybe it's a true story, I don't know, sticks his finger in that little hole and the town is saved. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
A contented soul is like that. It's a very small job, very small. I mean, someone, it's just this little hole, but it's going to save the whole thing, right? So this soul was like that. The saying is, someone who is divine and content, they will be able to have such clarity, because desire is blind. You won't even need to ask them. They're like a deity. They will do before being asked.
Amen.
And so this team, literally, I'd get these messages like, "Oh, so and so is prepared." It's like preparing something that was going to make it easier for everyone else. They hadn't been asked. They saw the need, this little hole. They put their finger in it, and how much it helped everyone else is beyond measure. That is contentment. There's cooperation, there's clarity, there's all these other, because it's purity, and purity is the mother of all virtues. So when there is contentment, when I'm not wanting, I can now be what we're meant to be as children of God, which is giving cooperation, giving support. So they're a pleasure to have on a team.
It's interesting you mentioned that because it made me realize, and it's not about anyone, but I can see what happens when you're around someone who's discontent.
Mm.
Because you're constantly worried, is it ever going to be good enough for them?
It's a bit of an eggshell situation. Discontent souls, people kind of, and they can seem very loving
Mhm.
and very sweet, but they're also very fragile and very sensitive. And you know that there isn't that self worth, there isn't that self value. other qualities of the soul might be expressed, but that one isn't there, and it's kind of distorting or destroying the other ones. So, so they're a little fragile. So everyone's a little bit of eggshells, and um, yeah, it doesn't quite work out well for anyone. I mean, we're all very supportive of each other, of course, but the team won't be able to experience its full potential because a piece of its energy is going towards making sure that soul's okay.
It makes me realize that, as I had mentioned, it feels like contentment contentment can be quite um, just devalued. I sort of maybe taken for granted, but it kind of feels like it's connected to how invisible spirituality is, the subtlety of spirituality, something that's so powerful, something that's not obvious at all, but has such a profound impact. But not until you actually sort of point it out, like that little boy who puts his finger in the hole. Nobody would have
What
really
is that
thought that.
story? It is Dutch, isn't it?
I don't. I just remember
Van
you told me.
something.
Actually, you told me a story when you were talking about that particular
Oh,
soul. So
okay. Oh, yes.
I know who you're talking about. Yes.
Right. I really should look it up. I'm not probably giving it well. But yeah, it seems like a nice quality. We always think of the biggies like love and peace and power and truth and um but and those are really big qualities. But when we're talking about spirituality as a way of life, um it shows up just as this purity, this contentment. Yeah. And so we say the height of spiritual development is that the soul is like an easy yogi. We had a beautiful class on this recently. Is an easy, very easygoing, able to really contribute to the benefit of situations and to themselves as well. Very easygoing, not reactive, not sensitive or fragile. And this is a sign of real spiritual development. Again, it's contentment. There's that easiness. And some people think contentment or easiness means doormat or obsequious. This. I like the term power of contentment. This is a powerful soul. They don't need anything. They're full. Content. They have all content. They are full. They have no desires, which doesn't mean they don't do anything. They're not an amoeba. They're acting, interacting, but they are full. And it's very connected to, we're looking at, this is the time of Diwali, which is all about abundance, prosperity. So Lakshmi is like this contented soul. She is the embodiment of cooperation, abundance, prosperity. This is contentment. It's not like I can't imagine Lakshmi going up to someone and asking for something, right? We just go to her. She's going to bestow, bestow, bestow. So contentment it's such a full state. It's a great power.
I'm really glad that we brought that up because of how often we can take for granted some of the subtle things. And it also made me realize how draining it is if you yourself are discontent,
Mm.
um, or if you're having to take care of trying to, take care of somebody else who's discontent. But to be around someone, and it is quite subtle. You don't realize that it's going to be okay no matter what that soul is, and whatever that is that you bring to that soul. And so I think there's a lot of gratitude. But I think part of the reason why I was asking that question too, and why it's connected to today, is because of sustaining it. I was really
Mm.
actually thinking a lot today, maybe from morning class, about cherishing. And I know you hear gratitude journals and things like that out there, but I was just really, it's such an intent of really cherishing purity, the value of accumulating something that's so invisible. So I was thinking about cherishing in terms of contentment, and I think you kind of brought that up during the reflection in terms of what I would be thinking about. And it seems to be very connected. I'm going to stop right here.
It's quite discontent, isn't it?
I'm going to have
Our
to stop.
sound system. Okay. A cherishing, valuing purity. Um, yeah, I think it's really, such fortune in a spiritual study like Raj Yoga, and that we get to kind of stop running around like hamsters on a treadmill and really reflect on what is the foundation of a happy life, a peaceful life. It's what we all want. And if we can get to, I think, the big step, the realization that it's got to do with something inside of me. I'm remembering just a very small incident. It was such an odd incident. I was at the grocery store today, and you have to, keep a distance. And so I couldn't. There was a person in front who was being served, but I didn't know what was going on because I'm standing so far away. I didn't have any clue what was going on there. And so then the customer left, and I was up next, and the cashier was lovely and said hello. And then he said, he says, "Some people are just never happy." And I'm like, what did just happen? And it was a very small thing, but it wasn't small maybe to that person, but it had to do with the receipt, and they no longer can email it, so they'd have to print it, but they wanted it. It doesn't matter the details, but he was saying, yeah, this soul is just so discontent. And now it's left with him, and this incredible ripple effect, a small thing, and when it starts to interact with karma, that's when I think things get really. So Raj Yoga helps me to see how I create a beautiful life for myself. And if I'm still thinking it's due to external forces, I'm not even on the right page. So I have to get onto the right page. It's okay, once I figured out, okay, it's got to do with things within me, how I'm acting, what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, it's decisions. It's in me. This is very empowering because I don't have control over other people. So it's great to know, okay, it's all in my hands. This is sort of a big step that we make. Okay, what do I have to do? What do I have to change within myself? And then it says, all you need is this purity that we are intrinsically, we say children of God, we are intrinsically benevolent beings. I just need to emerge my true nature. Easy, yeah. Just emerge my true nature, and I will have a beautiful life, a happy life, a peaceful life. This is our pure nature. So we cherish purity because it's a business decision to cherish purity. It is the most profitable state to be in terms of quality of life. So kind of have to think that through and really be online, not just because we're saying it, but sort of come to that conclusion. It's like a math proof. Well, A equals B and B equals C, therefore A equals C. Like it has to make sense to me, and then I'll be motivated.
Just trying to see if this is going to explode or something. Um, yeah, I was just, it was actually, I was really feeling like an upward spiral.
Mm-hmm.
Really, and it feels very different, I suppose, than, doing a gratitude journal. I don't know why that. Um, no offense to anyone online or anyone who's watching, but it kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Trying to list things and it's all situational. It was very different when you're accessing something that has nothing to do with physicality. And I was really feeling that connection um, between actually keeping something that's, I think we take for granted, which is spirituality, which is subtle, and keeping it very vibrant, but not in a very forceful way. And actually, when you were sharing just a lot of examples that you were sharing, I was really realizing there was this one moment I'll share that I was making pizza in Montreal one time.
Mm,
And I was not successful.
mm,
The dough did not work out, so I had to go and get, I was just visiting and I had to go get more ingredients. The kitchen was an absolute mess. I left an absolute mess, and I was terrified, really. I was making a mess. But one of the souls who walked in, she was like, "Wow, pizza! Wow!" Like that moment right there was just a feeling. It makes me realize something that's quite. Um, Let me restart. Um,
did you want this? Yeah.
anyways, the whole point of what I was trying to share was, do you find that as you continue on in this study that you accumulate more power? Because demotivated is one thing, but I think another thing is just spiritual upheaval that goes on inside. Um, do you find that through time, this power of contentment, does it go up and down? Is it something that stays with you? Does it leave an impact that has its own sort of protection? Because there's lots of things going on within each of us as we continue to get back to ourself again.
First, coming back to the gratitude piece, I think an attitude of gratitude is beautiful, but it's most effective when applied to imperishable things. Um, I think your concern that you were sharing is it being applied to temporary things, because that might set us up for disappointment. So I'm grateful for these people in my life, which is beautiful to have that attitude. But those people might leave or get upset with you. And so I just have to check what I'm applying that attitude of gratitude to. Um, and so with contentment, because it's connected to purity, it is powerful in terms of sustaining unconditional peace and happiness. But when we talk about purity, we're talking about cleaning the self. And what happens in the study is I clean, and then something might happen that triggers discontentment. And you're like, I cleaned. But as anyone who cleans knows, there's no end to how clean something can be. So I can clean at one level and then I go in at another level, then I go in with the Q-tips. So I'm going into deeper, more minutia of cleaning. And the same happens with the soul. I clean, I have a certain level, if you will, of contentment. And then something will happen that triggers discontentment, if you will, triggers a reaction, and you're like, that's odd. I'm really, and we sometimes get a little bit disappointed. We think, am I going backwards? What about all the effort I've made? Not at all. It's just a sign, okay, we're going now into another level of cleaning the self. And that's good. That's a graduation. So I think that's what I've noticed is that we never really, it's a beautiful study in that you can just continue to grow and grow, and you have to have that awareness so you don't get disappointed when suddenly you react to something and you're thinking, where did that come from? I was feeling so content. And it's like, okay, it's just a sign to go into another level of looking at the self.
Thank you. Something else came up actually during the reflection, and I know I had asked that question. There's some who are just demotivated, and for some, that I work with individuals with chronic pain, and that's um, just one, I guess, life experience that souls go through, where you're asked to do something for yourself, and So, one of the things I was thinking about actually during the reflection, in terms of these different elements that help my inner world feel healthy, feel rich, feel valuable, what has your experience been like in terms of the role the Supreme Soul plays in terms of igniting that um, attraction to taking care of my inner world? Um, that soul's part in terms of really treasuring and valuing that purity and power of contentment.
The Supreme Soul is a specialist, the only soul who is a specialist on souls. So you can imagine any topic you want, and imagine there's only one person in the world who is a specialist and expert on that topic, just one. And so when it comes to souls or spirituality, the Supreme Soul is the single expert. We have great knowledge about care on other levels. So we perfected our expertise about physical care, care for the body, physical health, financial care, different types of care. But the interesting thing is that spiritual care is kind of the mother. So, care on those other levels is deeply enhanced by spiritual care. So, at some point, one comes to the realization I need true self care, not physical care, but self care. Self refers to the soul, and there's only one being I can go to. And I was, as you were asking the question, for some reason, the image that came to my mind was a little child who finds that they're in a situation. We had a funny incident earlier today, which I heard you laughing, but finds that they're in a situation where they feel a little bit uncertain. And so the first thing they do is they run to their parent for that kind of comfort and contentment. And I think that's the instinct in the soul. But when we're body conscious, that instinct is seriously compromised. And so we run to other people, we run. But if I was really just aware of myself as a soul, it would be very natural to run to the Supreme Soul for sanctuary. The incident we had was a little girl trying to remember her lines. And you could tell she just kept looking over, Mom, what am I supposed to say? And the mom's trying to feed her the lines as quietly as possible because it's supposed to sound like it's coming from the little girl. But I think we all know that these ideas are coming from the mom. So you just see her, she's like, yeah, I'm here to tell you. Yeah, she's a preschooler. Oh my gosh, sweetness. But I loved watching. It didn't disturb me at all. It didn't even feel disingenuous or anything like this because what I loved was that relationship, that very natural relationship with a parent. And it's just an instinct. You just go, you just look at the parent. So it's very odd that we have these conversations about, and I understand why, because we're not really feeling ourselves to be souls. What do I do with a God? It's like, well, a child doesn't ever ask, what do I do with my parent? It's just such an instinct. I go to them for fulfillment, for sustenance, for support. For I just go, I just look at them. I just run to them. And so when I experience myself as a soul, I just, it's very natural that I just look to the Supreme Soul for comfort, contentment, sanctuary, support. I just, where else would I go? In addition, we say mother, father, teacher, guide. So, yes, I go for all those things, but also I go because that one is the expert on spirituality, the only expert on spirituality. So, eventually, every soul will land up at that doorstep.
Thank you. I know we were running out of time, but actually, I really appreciate that final thought you were sharing because it does feel like it swings back towards the value of the power of contentment because we're talking about souls wanting to be content. We're not talking about things and how much we can fill with things, but something that I can really appreciate now why all these years of being in this study, some of the very subtle things, that really um, fills you, and they can be easily taken for granted. But I think that even for souls who have not even taken the study, they can think of even really, just really subtle things that have really touched them. So I'll hand it back to you, Judy, for a little reflection. Thank you for those joining. Thank you for thoughtful answers.
And thank you for thought provoking questions, which I'm sure, yes, a discontented Mike. Um, and I'm sure that those listening also will be reflecting on the questions. As I sit here quietly in conversation with myself, I imagine what my day would be like if I was completely at peace with myself, nothing to prove, defend, explain, and completely free from desires, going through the day with just the natural feeling to support, contribute, cooperate, bestow, not for show, not for some return. In fact, not even aware that that's what I'm doing. So incognito. Just because I am full, I don't take. I leave other souls alone in my head. I accept, allow, acknowledge. I don't need situations to go a certain way. I don't need certain outcomes. I don't need souls to act a certain way. I don't need to fix anyone. I'm just at peace with myself as I move through the day, imagining a day in which I am content. How powerful that day would be. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for joining this evening. Feel free to let us know if you have questions. Again, if you have topics that you'd like to explore during this session here on Tuesdays or the ones on Thursdays. I'm just going to pass it back to Judy. Let us know about upcoming sessions. Shanti.
Yeah, we very much encourage your input. If there's anything that you would like to explore in these sessions, the interviews, and we appreciate you joining. Thursdays are also interview format. We try to look at the essentials of Raj Yoga. I think that this Thursday it is studying with a clean heart. That sounds very powerful. So, studying with a clean heart. And then on the weekends, we have Inner Fitness on the Zoom platform. And the session coming up is about functional fitness or just functional. There we go. Functional. All right. Come and have the mystery solved. I don't know. So, drop in meditations Tuesdays, Thursdays, Sunday. This Sunday, of course, is special. It's the third Sunday of the month. So, it will be World Meditation Hour. And of course, this is such a need in the world now. But again, it's very connected to contentment. to just vibrate contentment in the world by taking care of the self spiritually. It's a very simple and yet deep way to express care for the world. So there you go. Again, email us if any thoughts. I feel there's more. There is more. We have workshops coming up. I'm going. See, this is like the child with a parent. I'm getting my lines fed from the side. 21st of November, 12 to 1:15. 1:30, 12 to 1:30, 90-minute workshop. So these are Raj Yoga workshops and applied spirituality. So Saturday, November 21st, applied spirituality, a Raj Yoga workshop, 12 to 1:30. This is Mountain Standard Time. And then the following Sunday, the 28th, another Saturday, November 28th, 12 to 1:30, another Raj Yoga workshop, the God Experience. So again, this is all posted on our website. So you can go there to get all the links and more information. And always feel free to email us if there's any questions. Thank you for joining. Om Shanti.